Well, greetings and salutations, imagination connoisseurs, and you members of the Post-Geek Singularity community. It is I, the notorious RMB, coming at you on this Saturday afternoon, post-opening of Captain Marvel, and another thing that you might all have to see. As a matter of fact, I know you have to see it. You might not be aware of it. Is the extraordinary documentary that has opened wide yesterday, Apollo 11. Now, don't give me any of that guff that the moon landing was faked. As many people know that are in the know, we couldn't have faked the moon landing back in 1969. It would have been impossible. And when you watch the Apollo 11 documentary, you will see exactly why. It is an extraordinary documentary about human achievement and going to the moon. It is fantastic. I cannot recommend it enough. Please see Apollo 11. It had some of it was actually originally shot, believe it or not, in 70 millimeter. And I don't know if it's still playing. It opened in IMAX. I don't know if it's still playing in IMAX anywhere, but if it is, you should see it. Hence the NASA shirt that I'm wearing, my NASA t-shirt. I'm a big fan of NASA or ENSA, if you like to speak V'ger. So anyway, Captain Marvel opened. It's opened huge. With international box office, it's closing at least above 400 million worldwide for the weekend, which is fantastic. I did see Captain Marvel last night in the Cinerama Dome. Unbeknownst to me, the two directors showed up to introduce the movie. They weren't exactly scintillating speakers, however. I would have liked to have gotten a little bit of insight into the making of the movie from them, but they basically just said hello and were ushered off the stage and left. But still, it was pretty cool that they came out to the Cinerama Dome to say hello to the crowd. The crowd was packed. There were many, as I predicted, there were many young ladies in the audience who came decked out in Captain Marvel garb, whether it was t-shirts or shirts or jackets. It was a very enthusiastic audience of people who saw the film, and it got a rousing round of applause. And I think for the most part, people liked it. I did hear a number of people grumbling on the way out of the theater. None which were women, however, which I found interesting. As I was always saying, that we are underestimating, we, the geek pundits here on the YouTubes and on the interwebs, woefully underestimated we live in our own bubble. All of us fans that we live in our own bubble. We always have. And I think Captain Marvel has proven that she had a much wider reach outside of the genre or fan community than fan community pundits were predicting. All of those except myself, of course. Go back and watch what I've spoken about Captain Marvel. I've been talking about how it's going to have a much bigger opening than anyone anticipated, and I would expect it to probably top out somewhere at $750 million to even $1 billion, depending. But it's been very interesting watching all the punditry and the Monday morning quarterbacking and everybody going back and forth and comparing and contrasting the movie to Wonder Woman. And, you know, it's just, our community is a very interesting community. And for my own part, I'm going to participate tomorrow in an all spoiler review of the movie. I will not be talking about the film much, other than to say that I very much enjoyed it. There were a few things that I thought were a little wacky, but for the most part, what I really enjoyed, it's not just set in the 90s. It actually feels like it was made in the 90s. There is an action scene that we've seen in the trailers that's on a train in the LA transit system. And at the same time, what you really don't get a sense of is that Nick Fury and Agent Coulson are chasing Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, as she is, as she's chasing the train. And the way it was shot, it for whatever reason, it made me feel like I was watching Die Hard with a Vengeance. And Sam Jackson was Zeus, his character Zeus from Die Hard with a Vengeance, which I don't know if that was intentional. There were a lot of in-jokes. I was tickled to death, as we all know, that Carol Danvers falls into a Blockbuster video when she first arrives on Earth. And she one of the delightful things, I won't spoil the surprise of what videotape she actually picks up and examines, because it's one of my favorite movies of all time. But what I really liked was noticing which movies were in the background, and that had to have been intentional. I mean, I know they were out of focus. They probably didn't have to clear those movies because they weren't necessarily front and center. But I did catch somebody did put To Live and Die in L.A. William Friedkin's To Live and Die in L.A. To Live and Die in L.A., which is one of my favorite 80s films and one of my favorite Friedkin films. And to see it in the movie, I was like, the art department. I don't know if the directors picked out each one of those tapes. I would imagine probably they did. But if they didn't, kudos to the art department for making sure that an out of focus To Live and Die in LA VHS tape was on display. If you blink, you'll miss it. But To Live and Die in LA is, as I've shown on my channel here, I own 4 different copies of the movie on Blu-ray. I even have the Polish, believe it or not, the Polish movie poster for To Live and Die in LA is hanging right down the hallway that leads into my bedroom. And I'm a huge To Live and Die in LA fan, and I chuckled enormously when To Live and Die in LA showed up in Captain Marvel. So it was a lot of fun. And, the excitement was palpable, and they do something with the Marvel logo. Now it's out online. You can read about it. I don't want to spoil it for you. Don't look it up. I didn't know. I knew something was coming. I didn't know what was coming. But when it comes, I mean, I defy anyone who's a fan of Marvel Comics and a fan of the MCU to not get misty-eyed over the new Marvel Studios logo. I don't know if they're going to continue to use it. I don't know. I would hope that it would be in front of Endgame and Spider-Man Far From Home, because it's just too good. What they did was marvelous. It was creative. Hats off to Kevin Feige and everybody at Marvel Studios for creating that new Marvel Studios logo. I can't imagine. Well, you'll see. You'll see. I don't want to belabor the point, but it was really wonderful what they did. And I think it was indicative of how much care and thought is put into the Marvel Studios movies. Now, there's a lot of people already bitching about how certain things in the film don't jibe with Captain America, the First Avenger. And, I really haven't gone back to examine that closely, but now I want to. I'm going to go back, and I'm waiting to the 4K of Captain America, the First Avenger drops, to go back and check it out. But for the most part, I really enjoyed Captain Marvel. And one of the things I think I liked the most about it was they clearly made the movie they set out to make. And what I mean by that is, I think that Thor: The Dark World, for instance, I know that it had a number of production problems. And I think the finished film does not totally represent what they were going for when they started making it. I know it was early on in the MCU's history, but I really felt that Captain Marvel, whatever you think about the movie, whether you liked it or not, I think that they really succeeded in making the movie they wanted to make. And that's something that's important to me, at least as a viewer and as a filmmaker. If I can see that, like, I didn't think that it was a missed opportunity. There were certainly decisions I might not have agreed with 100%, but for the most part, I thought it was pretty terrific for what it was. It was wildly entertaining, and I got out of it what I wanted from it. And there was a lot of really interesting things in it, but I don't want to get too much into that, because I'm going to be talking about Captain Marvel at length with John Campia in a spoiler-filled review tomorrow. I think we're going to do it at 3. I don't know. I think we're going to record it, so it's not going to be live, but it'll be interesting. Mark C says Captain Marvel 4K is already out. Saw it at Walmart. Maybe Walmart got it early. I don't know. Although that means I have to go to Walmart. But if it's already out, doesn't Best Buy have a Steelbook? I'll go there. But anyway, what I really wanted to talk about this week, and because people have been asking me, and of course, Midnight's Edge dropped a video of me, an extensive chat we had about Star Trek canon and Star Trek Discovery and the state of Star Trek, which, by the way, I know a lot of people, people are saying that Midnight's Edge is alt-right and all this. I'm like, come on. No, they're not. But I really do appreciate they did this chat with me and they turned it into a video. Look, as a documentarian and a DVD special features producer, let me tell you, there's a lot of work that those guys put into their videos. And this video is no exception. I thought it was just going to be us chatting, like just because we do these podcasts that they put up. But they went all out, made a real video with editorial, and it's great. And I was touched, and I couldn't believe they gave me that amount of tender, loving care. So kudos to the Midnight's Edge guys and girls and gentle beings over there, and Andre and the gang, because they did a great job, and I was very flattered by the job they did. So I thank them for that, and I encourage everybody to go watch that video. So, which brings me around to the topic of this chat. This week's Star Trek Discovery episode, if memory serves. Now, I'm going to delve into some spoiler territory. I don't know if you guys watched the episode, but basically it is a direct sequel to the first, I want to call it, failed Star Trek pilot, The Cage, that was later, in a brilliant move, repurposed into the two-parter, the first season original series two-parter, The Menagerie, parts 1 and 2. And it's a direct sequel to that, and the episode opens with clips from The Cage with Jeffrey Hunter and in all the different costumes. And for those of you who already felt canon was muddled, it starts, previously on Star Trek, and they actually show episode clips from The Cage that was made in basically 1964 and 1965, later reused in 66 in the 66-67 season for The Menagerie. So, and there's a hard cut from this previously on Star Trek where they show you the episodes of The Cage, and you cut from Captain Pike, played by Jeffrey Hunter, in that episode, to Anson Mount as Pike, and nothing matches. Nothing at all is there's nothing canonical about it. And for a show that has been trying to reinvent itself, but then also say it's part of canon, they're showing us costumes that have not been a part of Discovery. It was, I thought, while on one hand, I get it. I think that was cool. They acknowledged the past. I mean, talk about a muddled decision. Like, if they were really cool, if the show was really clever, in my mind, they would have recreated scenes from The Cage using their actors. I mean, that would have been, if they had done that, then I would have been like, okay, that's clever. I don't really understand what they were trying to accomplish other than remind me once again of how weird and muddled what Star Trek Discovery is really doing. Really is. Because it's not like they showed you, they didn't really contextualize the episode. They were just trying to explain, like, for those of you who don't know or who have never watched Star Trek, the original series, they actually went to this planet. Let me recap. In the episode The Cage and in The Menagerie, you find out that 11 years before Kirk was in command of the Enterprise, Spock took his former commander, Christopher Pike, who had been in an accident and who was confined to a wheelchair and could only beep yes or no. He'd been exposed to horrible radiation and he was burned. And Spock famously took his captain back to Talos 4, the planet that was in the unused Star Trek pilot, because the Talosians, who are a race of psionically incredibly powerful creatures, their bodies have basically atrophied and they've become drunk on their own thoughts. I mean, basically, it was actually a line that was cut from the episode, but I think it's Vina. It's either Vina or Pike talks about. I think it's Vina, who basically explains that the Talosians have basically become like larvae, where they just kind of sit curled up using their mental powers, and they capture other sentient beings from throughout the galaxy, and they live through those beings' memories because their bodies have become so shriveled. And in the episode, in the original episode, The Cage, they famously used 3 women of short stature to play the Talosians, and they actually wrapped their breasts down, and they wear these glittery silver gowns with these cool amulets, these pendants, and then they had these giant heads, alien heads that house their giant brains, and they famously pulsated. And I think every kid who ever watched The Menagerie called the Talosians the butt heads. You couldn't not call them the butt heads because they looked like they had butt heads. So in this Discovery episode, and I'm not going to ruin it. I'm not going to ruin it for you guys. So I won't, you guys should go back and watch this and make up your own minds. But so in basically they go back to Talos 4 and they set up the fact that now Discovery is set in the period of time after after The Cage took place. So, and apparently everything about Talos 4, it was the only the Enterprise, as we learn in The Menagerie, which, by the way, this is not canonical. In The Menagerie, Uh, they say that the Enterprise is the only ship that's ever visited Talos 4. Well, that's not true. Not anymore. Not according to this episode. Not one, but two, but three starships now have visited Talos 4. And already they showed me the cage, which leads me to believe the menagerie is just as canonical as the cage in the Discovery universe, except in the episode The Menagerie, they get the amount of starships wrong. So already the writers of if memory serves, have screwed up canon. They start with official Star Trek canon, and then they proceed to continually screw it up through the course of the episode. But here's what was interesting to me, and hence the title of this chat. So, if you're a writer and you're on a TV show and you're gonna go back, literally, you're gonna go back into Star Trek prehistory, and not only that, you've now built an entire season of your own show around a failed Star Trek pilot. Because remember, the cage was famously rejected by the networks, but in a brilliant by NBC, but in a brilliant move for Star Trek Discovery, or for the original series, in a brilliant move, they took this asset, this beautifully produced hour of television, and they incorporated it into the original series as a two-part episode. And basically that two-part episode, aside from being there's an exterior shot where they beam down to the starbase, it's basically a bottle show where for most of the episode they don't even go onto the bridge that much. In most of the episode they're in a courtroom, the briefing room set. And it was a brilliant, I mean, if you want to look at it's so funny because the Menagerie is perhaps the Menagerie two-parter is the greatest establisher of canonical Star Trek ever, of anything that they've ever done in the series, because you see that the Enterprise had a history before Kirk took command. It was a brilliant thing. And the two-parter establishes a timeline. It was 11 years ago that Pike commanded the Enterprise and Spock served under him. Or was it 13 years ago? 11 years. I forget the actual. I can't remember everything about Star Trek. But it was an amazing canonical effort on the parts of the producers of Star Trek. But so they introduced the Talosians, right? And when they introduced the idea that this civilization has basically, they're almost like the most forbidden planet. Everyone talks about how the movie Forbidden Planet is in fact the precursor to Star Trek. I've always believed that. Now the Talosians are basically, and I'll flat out say it, they're the Krell. We never see the Krell in Forbidden Planet, but they're the Krell, the civilization that they became using augmentation from their civilization. They were able to manifest their dreams. They were able to use their mental powers to project and create anything they wanted to create, and they destroyed their civilization. Well, the Talosians are basically like that. Their mental powers increased, and they became drunk on their ability to use illusion and then feed. They wanted to live vicariously. So their physical bodies became very tiny and very diminutive, and their mental powers, and that's why their brains were so big. And famously, they cast these three women to play Talosians. Well, what do they do in this episode? They have the three Talosians, but the lead Talosian's now like a strapping dude. He's a big guy, and he towers over the other Talosians. And it was like, the whole point of the Talosian civilization is that we're supposed to get the idea. They always shot famously the Talosians from below, and even though they were women, they still looked scary and bigger than they really were. You can see on the thumbnail for this particular chat, I picked a behind the scenes shot where Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, is with the actresses Meg Wiley and the other actresses playing the Talosians. And when I watch that, I'm like, in a nutshell, everything, and this, again, is going to seem trivial and people are going to get mad at me, but in a nutshell, here's what I don't like about Star Trek Discovery. It's like, okay, if you're going to use the Talosians and you're going to create, let's say it with me now, verisimilitude, you need to make the audience understand a little bit about Talosian society by doing kind of what the same thing, that the Talosians should have been that way. You cast small women as the Talosians. I mean, that was the whole point. That was what made it kind of scary, because you didn't know what gender they were. You suspected, because you can't really tell. They're hairless, And it was, as a kid growing up watching Star Trek, I'm like, man, those are some scary ass aliens. I mean, it turns out that they're not as scary as you might think when you're watching The Cage, because what's really interesting is if you just watch The Cage, it doesn't end well. It's a tragic episode. And I will say this for the writers of Discovery, the two writers who wrote that episode, they did accentuate the tragic nature of what happens in the episode. But they do things like the whole mystery of where Spock is gone. That was kind of solved. We don't need to. That's no longer a mystery. This was also Michelle Paradise, who is now the new showrunner of Star Trek Discovery, has come on board. This is her first effort as one of the producers of Star Trek Discovery. And I will say this, it's a beautiful episode of Star Trek. It's completely over-directed. There's a lot of long shots in my mind that were relatively needless to have. I think it was really over-directed. It was very Battlefield Earth in its cantered angles, which bothered me to no end. But again, I always wonder, like, I get it. I get that they're going to go back to Talos 4 and do all this stuff. But the rift, I thought what they did, the rift between Burnham and Spock was so ordinary, and it was so not creative, and it was so not worthy of Star Trek. They tied it into something Kirk later said to Spock in This Side of Paradise, and they used the term half-breed. And for all of their talk of, it was just, in my mind, it just was pedestrian. And the way they used, they trumped up a reason to go to Talos 4 that didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And when they get there, the Talosians, they know Spock's coming. They know Spock's coming with Burnham, but then they made it look like, they weren't at Talos 4. There's something that happens. And I just, again, the creativity that could be brought to bear on these episodes seems to always elude them. They always take the most simplistic, mundane route. And I think the relationship with Stamets and Colbert, now that he's back from Mushroom Land, is doing a disservice to both of their characters. I really do. But I don't understand why they feel the need to constantly go back and revisit other Star Trek episodes. I mean, even when the fourth season of Enterprise touched on Star Trek lore and Star Trek history, they were adding to it and showing us things we hadn't seen. They were giving us levels of detail. And I feel like they just come up with these ideas like, wow, the fans will like it if we go back to Talos 4. But unless unless they have a really good reason to do it, all they seem to do is then go to these places, touch on these old episodes, muddle with what's come before, and sort of denigrate it all. I mean, they've certainly taken Spock's struggle away from what the character Spock was for 50 years. They've now saddled him with a learning disability, and he was emotionally wounded when Burnham leaves him. And they've made Burnham now this character that's so pivotal in Spock's life that I find myself as a longtime viewer of Star Trek somewhat offended by it. It really cheapens. If you go back and you watch the original series after you've watched Discovery, it cheapens almost every plot point of Spock's development through the original series. Because now you're always going to think, well, it was Burnham. It was that they had this rift when he was a little kid and she called him a half-breed, and that was his sister, and then she left home. I mean, to my mind, it's borderline offensive, and it makes me angry. But the real question I have is, what is it all supposed to mean? What are they hoping to achieve as writing staff in terms of their place in Star Trek history? Especially this season, they've gone back and all they have done has been strip mining and changing what has existed for 50 years, as if I can't get over the fact that they're saying that we're better than the Star Trek that came before, because we're going to show you how not nuanced and not good. And me, I'm here to be Mr. Positivity, and I want every episode of Discovery to be great. That's what I want. Every time I go in, I'm like, maybe this episode will be great. I was kind of excited to see what they were going to do. oh, there's Talosians in. I was thinking that they were gonna, work in the Talosians to the Red Angels somehow or something. I just have a feeling that when they come up with these ideas, they're just not thought through, and these conflicts aren't thought through. The conflict between Burnham and Spock, this big memory about what happened between them, could have been in any TV show, any show. It was in my mind, the most uncreative thing that they could have possibly done, and yet that's what they did. And we're supposed to. I want something that is far more nuanced and far more meaningful and has far more resonance, other than Burnham feeling that, oh, she can't stay here because everyone's making fun of the family now, and she's going to call her brother a name and leave home because maybe that'll make it easier for him to hate her, which makes really no sense. They're Vulcans. But anyway. So I just wonder what it all means, man. What does it all mean? I don't know what it all means. And I'm not excited when they just show me Talosians for their own sake. I would have rather have watched the entire episode and have it be about Vina and Pike. That was my favorite part of the whole episode is the relationship. Of course, because why not? They have to bring back Vina, and in case you don't know, let me show you what Vina's really like. But that was the most resonant part. I mean, the whole episode should have really been about Vina and Pike, because that was, to find out what she'd been feeling about him, and you find out that the Talosians, had created this memory of Pike for her. So what happens when he comes back for real? I don't know. It was all anyway. That's all. I'm just kind of musing. I wasn't thinking this all through. But I just felt that what they did with Burnham and young Spock, and what they've done with Spock this whole season, has really done a disservice to the character of Spock. And I just keep wondering, why do they have to diminish these classic characters in the service of propping up these new characters? I don't understand I just don't understand the impulse behind it. And as a longtime fan, I don't know what I'm supposed to take away from that, and how that's supposed to be palatable. And I don't understand why not create new characters? I understand they want to tie it all in, but it really, I don't know. It just bugs me. So not a really well thought out chat today, but it was just something I want to talk about because everybody's been asking me about Star Trek Discovery. And what I thought about this week because of the Talosians and because of the tie into the original series. Look, just because they show me Talosians, I'm not like, yippee, that doesn't, you need to tell me a great story. You can't just say, well, Spock's brain is, he has temporal problems, not mental problems, and we have to fix his brain. So the only place we could go was back to Talos 4. Okay, that was a thinly veiled need to go to Talos 4, but I'll go with it. All right. Whatever. So I'm going to answer your questions now and have a discussion. What do you guys think? Mark C asks, any word if Guy Williams' Zorro will be on Disney Plus? I don't know. That's a good question. They say they're going to put the entire Disney library on Disney Plus. I hope so. How cool would that be? As everyone knows, or maybe they don't know, Disney did do a Zorro TV show with Guy Williams. And it would be great to see that on the series. And Mark C, as I said earlier, he already said Captain Marvel in 4K was out at Walmart. Well, then I got to get on that, son, right away. Because if I don't, that's important. Olenti says, PSA, watch The Expanse. As Olenti says, watch The Expanse. I could not agree more. The Expanse is a terrific show. I cannot wait for season 4. It's so great, and now you can see the first 3 seasons. Season 3 used to be behind a paywall, but now all 3 seasons are streaming on Amazon Prime, so you can watch. And if this show follows the books, as it kind of really has been, The Expanse is going to get bonkers, and I don't know how they're gonna. The show gets huge. It gets huge. It expands. Let me just say, spoiler alert, way beyond our solar system. So Olenti also says, it sounds like you're trying to give it a chance. But at what point do you think you'll stop watching the show? I can't watch a show I don't enjoy. Well, I can't say I don't. While I actively disdain, have great disdain for Star Trek Discovery, I'm watching it because, first of all, it's Star Trek. from an anthropological point of view, I feel a need to watch it, and I do get excited to see every episode. But like this episode, when you're noticing the directing and the camera angles, and I feel like it was a very ostentatiously directed episode. It's weird. You know, when the direction, I'm like, why are they pulling the camera back this far? I guess it kind of looks cool, but why are you doing that? Because, you know, when you're directing a TV show, the directing TV is a story-driven, producer, writer-driven medium. The direction should never get in the way of the story that's being told. In my mind, look, I've only directed 5 episodes of TV. But your directing should never get in the way of the story being told. And I felt that episode, I felt that a lot about Star Trek Discovery, but this episode in particular, I don't know the name of the person who directed it, but I was like, dude, come on, stop showing off. let's just talk the story. And you know, I just don't get what's happening and why you're shooting it that way. But yes, I am trying to give the show a chance. I really am. I really am. Hassan Chavez is here. Wow, dude. Thank you, sir. Hello, Notorious. Maybe I should sing every time someone calls me Notorious. Now, should I do the Duran Duran? No, Notorious. By the way, it's a great album produced by Trevor Horn. I love Notorious. A lot of horns in that. I mean, melding Duran Duran and like Tower of Power or any great band that had a great horn section. That's one of the great things about that album. American Science, Skin Trade. I'm a huge Duran Duran fanatic. I can't believe Notorious is 33 years old. But so Hassan, thank you very much for that generous super chat. Will you gatekeep the verisimilitude of the new Game of Thrones? I remember you were kind of soft on season 7. No, look, I love Game of Thrones, but season 7 pushed it. As everyone knows, like the distance that ravens can travel, and when our band of brothers was being attacked by the White Walkers and they were on that little island in that middle in that lake, the amount of time it took for her message to get to Dragonstone and then have Dany come back with her dragons to help out. I didn't believe that. And I know they had to compress the time, but Game of Thrones usually did a pretty good job of verisimilitude, and season 7 pushed that, as has been famously reported. So I will. Look, I can't wait to see Game of Thrones, and I think it's going to be a fast-paced 6 episodes. I know we're getting 2 extra long episodes, but yes, I will be gatekeeping the verisimilitude of Game of Thrones. But I can't wait. I'm really excited. So, Stubble McShave says, I like the returning gags on DS9 like Morn and Baudet. I agree with you. I think one of the joys of Deep Space Nine was all of the supporting characters. I mean, once they figured out what they were going to do with our main characters, like creating the great friendship between Bashir and O'Brien, which was great. I love that. Every time they came out of a holodeck dressed like pilots or something, it was great. And I think you're right. I mean, that was one of the great things about Deep Space Nine and how they developed the secondary characters was amazing. It was amazing. And everybody from Brock Peters as Avery Brooks's father to Robert Foxworth as a Starfleet admiral on Earth. I mean, they did such a great job with all the secondary characters and our cameo characters like Morn. They didn't have to do that, but I love that they did that, and it was great. It was really fantastic that they did that. Officer Boyers, Jim Boyers is here. He says, you're completely ruining my non-watching of Star Trek Discovery. You're going to have to, you know what? You don't even have to like watch the show to understand the episode. I mean, if you love Star Trek, you kind of got to go in and watch because it's the Talosians, man. And I'm like, okay, I guess I have to watch this because there's Talosians. Alexander Wilson says, spoiler alert, after watching Captain Marvel, I think the next Avengers movie after Endgame will be Secret Invasion. What are your thoughts? I don't know. I thought what they did with the Skrulls in Captain Marvel was, I thought, really audacious. They made a fundamental change in the character of the Skrulls that I'm not going to say what it is, but I was surprised by it. And I thought it was a pretty audacious change. So I don't know about Secret Invasion although that's a really good way to change the status quo. And maybe we don't know everything about the Skrulls that we've been told, which I could see too. I could see too. And that's I thought what they did was really, really interesting. And I really like that. And I'll tell you, I thought the scrolls were great. It was great to see them. I love the scene with them on the beach. I still think watching them come up out of the water, out of the ocean, was a great choice. There was something just cool about that. Kind of like, one of the things I loved about Rogue One was seeing stormtroopers on the beach. They had those promo pictures of stormtroopers in the water. I always thought that was rad. Like, that's cool. It's like seeing when you saw snow troopers. I thought that was cool too. Mercer Create says Dukat is a great villain and Damar is a hero. Again, the way they treated Damar, how he got depressed and became like this drunk, and then he stepped up to help save his people. And Dukat's change in the show when he turned villain again, when he turned heel again in Deep Space Nine, I love that. He kind of was good for a while, but nah, he's really not a good guy. And he goes full heel again. I thought that was tremendous. I loved it. It was great. And again, it just speaks to how great a show Deep Space Nine is. Look, admittedly, the first two seasons, like with Next Generation, are hit and miss. I mean, I always tell people the first season of Deep Space Nine is just kind of boring. I love the pilot. I love Emissary. And the last two episodes, Duet and In the Hands of the Prophets, are great. The great episodes of Star Trek. There's a few other good episodes in the first season, but a lot of them are just kind of boring. The second season starts to get good. I love the first 3-part, as my ex-wife used to say, the Angry Monkey Bajoran episode, where they're all the Bajorans were very angry people, like apes screaming at each other in a cage. The Bajorans were angry. But I did like that 3-parter, and it delved into the second season. Really delves into Bajoran politics, but then you start meeting the inklings of the beginnings of the Dominion, where you finally meet the Jem'Hadar, and I remember thinking, when what happens, if you guys haven't seen what happens in second season of Deep Space Nine, there's an episode, I think it's called the Jem'Hadar. I think the episode's called the Jem'Hadar, where it's a suicide mission, and it was shocking. And I'm like, oh my God. And then you realize the storm clouds are gathering. And then in the third season, Avery Brooks shaved his head and grew a beard, and they give you the Defiant, and half of the third season is really, really good. But by the time they get to season 4 and tie all of that in, then seasons 4, 5, 6, and 7 of Deep Space Nine are rousing entertainment. And you want to watch great serialized storytelling, it's pretty damn great. And season 6 of Deep Space Nine, in my mind, is the strongest season of modern Star Trek ever. If you're invested, I think it's really, really terrific. So yeah. Mark C says audacious change equals not Marvel canon. Well, look, man, here's my feeling. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has been subverting or changing the Marvel Comics canon throughout its run. And I don't mind that. They're using it to draw from, but it's not. The Marvel Cinematic Universe only has to be canonically faithful to itself. It's like saying that the Winter Soldier storyline was exactly the way it was in the comics. It's not. Look at the Mandarin in Iron Man 3. I'm an Iron Man 3 lover. I loved Iron Man 3, and I love what they did with the Mandarin, because the Mandarin is essentially a racist character, and that's a change. I thought it was really interesting. I love what they did with that character. I love what they did with the Mandarin, and a lot of people don't like that. Now, as a lifelong Marvel Comics reader, I don't care that they're changing comics canon. I mean, if you read Civil War happens because the New Warriors in the comics, the New Warriors were reality TV stars, and they were showboating against some supervillains, and there was an explosion next to a school or a school bus or something, and a lot of school kids died. And that was the impetus of what we have in the movie as the Sokovia Accords, but it was different. What they're doing is they're taking inspiration from the comics, and it doesn't bother me that they're making changes. I do not consider Marvel Comics canon and the MCU canon to be at all comparative. One inspires the other, and I don't expect to see Asgard recreated in, where is it, Oklahoma, even though I really love the Siege storyline. And I did like the whole Dark Avengers in the aftermath of the Civil War. I loved all that in the comics, loved it. but I don't expect to see it in the movies because it doesn't work. I mean, that stuff. There are things that are. It's like Wolverine's costume, and the X-Men costumes. Here's Gilbert. Everybody, do you want to be on camera, Gilbert, today? The X-Men costumes, I don't think would work. Even though, as much as I like the Grant Morrison, Frank Quietly run in X-Men, I don't know in X-Men Apocalypse if those quietly designed uniforms really work. They don't. Do they look so great on camera? I appreciate the fealty to the comics, but do they work? I don't know. Stubble McShave says the first season of Wheel of Time seems to be book 1 and 2. Well, that's reassuring that it's the books 1 and 2. I mean, I think that's terrific that they're doing that because that makes a whole heck of a lot of sense. I wonder how close they're going to hew to the books. I hope relatively close because that would be great. Let's see what else everybody. Dan V. Oh, hang on. Let's see. Dan V900 says it has an average score of 6.81 out of 10, which means according to critics it's at 79%. That's not a critically acclaimed movie. Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know if it is. I mean, look, audiences, all I know is the audience that I saw Captain Marvel with loved it. And especially I think the female contingent in the audience loved it even more. And although I did again hear grumbling from guys, like I don't know what people expect. For me, I got exactly out of out of it what I wanted, and it's weird that I understand people are comparing and contrasting it to like Doctor Strange, but I really love the whole opening of the film. I love the whole the development, the character development, and how she came to Earth and how she interacted with Nick Fury. I loved seeing the Star Force. I loved seeing the Kree homeworld. I really was interested, and I thought they did a really good job of world building and all of that. Crixus Maximus says, as for the number of Talos visits, just because it's not in the official records doesn't mean much. The first MiG-15 shot down in Korea had a Soviet pilot, but all sides kept that secret. Yeah, I mean, that's true. The question is why go there, and what they're going to do with all of that. I mean, why go there in the show? Why not do something original and unique that they haven't done before? I think they're leaning on Star Trek canon when they don't have to. And they're changing things that came before when they don't have to either. Dan V900 says Blade Runner 2049 and War of the Planet of the Apes movies, for example, have an A- and 2049 bombed financially while War barely made money. Yeah, that's true. Oh, I see what you've got a whole line, Crixus Maximus and V900 that I've not been reading. Matthew Poole says, thanks for getting me through my shift at work, man. Always tune in, but never get the chance to comment. But you get me through my early morning baking shifts. Well, that's cool. Where do you bake? I love that you are an early morning baker. I love that. I think it's great. Dan V900 says, Captain Marvel is the worst one because of retcons and bad explanations like Solo. Kevin Feige's interview recently about a certain reveal showed how poorly thought out it was, since it was a last minute thing. I think I know what you're talking about, and I agree. There's one thing in Captain Marvel I will say I hated. It has something to do with a certain trait that a main character has, and I thought it was really lame. And it didn't even seem like they filmed it properly. It was not good. Let's see what else do people have to say here. Captain Robert April says RE the SS Columbia. The Columbia was only listed as lost in the general area, and 2, it doesn't count if you don't come back. It's true. By the way, apparently Talos 4 is 2 light years away from a starbase that we found out. I mean, if it's 2 light years away from a starbase, which kind of could fit in with the menagerie, wouldn't the Talosians just fuck with that starbase and anybody there for fun? Like I was like, they get a little bored. There's a species we haven't met yet. They're on Starbase 11 or whatever. We're gonna fuck with them for a while. T Cordless says, well, if it ends up at 1 billion, a Rotten Tomatoes of 75, and an audience score of A, I think everyone can agree it's a success on every metric. You know what? Captain Marvel is a success already. It was a success with the audience I saw it with, and that's all anybody cares about is the audience. Did the audience like it? Yes, the audience liked it. In my audience, they loved it. Emmett Beach says, too bad people want to like or dislike Captain Marvel based on politics, but isn't all art and appreciation thereof very subjective? Well, as many people have heard me know say before, I think that while art is subjective, I think there is an element to good storytelling that is not subjective. I think there is objectively good storytelling. Now, and that can't be denied. People can deny it. People say, well, they don't particularly like something, but that doesn't mean the storytelling is objectively good or bad. I think there is an objective component to good storytelling that you can recognize and you can actually analyze and see and find out. And that's why the great movies work. One of the things here's something that always struck me when I was in film school, when I was at USC, and there were times I saw movies at USC that I had never seen before, and I was able to see them. Luckily, they have a theater on campus, a beautiful, it's like 500-seat movie theater at USC called the Norris Cinema. And when I went there, even though I transferred in, I had to take a freshman film class from Drew Casper, and I'm so glad I did. And there were movies that I saw for the first time. All About Eve, which is one of my favorite films, changed my life. Swear to God, in terms of what I thought great screenwriting was. All About Eve, Best Picture. I mean, it's funny because it was Best Picture of 1950. It's a very famous movie. The cast is incredible. It's one of my top 10 favorite films of all time. All About Eve is amazing. And I sat there and I saw it in that theater, and I'd never seen it before. And this would have been in 1989, early 1989. And there I was. And I was sitting in the theater, and I was blown away. Like this movie came out in 1949, won the Oscar in 1950 for Best Picture, and it was no myth, or it was that this movie was good. It was already deemed being good, and I watched it. I watched it. What was that? 40 years later. I watched it 40 years after it was made, and I'm watching this film, and I was blown away by it. And I do think the great movies and the great stories of all time, that's why the stories of Shakespeare endure. Their plots and the way they unfold are objectively great. Now, you could say they're objectively great because I grew up as part of the white cis patriarchy in the West. And that might be true. But I do think great storytelling is great storytelling. And that's why that you objectively can tell a great story. And I don't think great stories are just subjective. I think there's an objective component to every great story. There has to be, because then one day the great stories endure. They endure the test of time, and they endured the test of time because of their objectively good storytelling. Jason McKibben says, isn't Deep Space Nine the show that had the same writers as Babylon 5? I seem to remember something about this. No, they didn't have the same writers. Babylon 5 was created and developed by J. Michael Straczynski. And it's different. I mean, they say that he presented, but here's the thing. Here's my thinking on this. They were shows that came out around the same time, and people want to make this rivalry between them. And a lot of people talk about, I like Babylon 5 better. And indeed, Babylon 5 is a great show in its own right. I'm a big fan of Babylon 5. But the idea of setting a Star Trek show on a star base is not out of the realm of realism when you're thinking about, okay, we've now done 2 shows based on the Enterprise. What is the new kind of a show that we could do that feels like it's part of the Star Trek universe? And if you go back to Gene Roddenberry's original explanation of Star Trek being it's wagon train to the stars, well, Deep Space Nine is kind of Bonanza in space. The Deep Space Nine, the Bajoran sector is the Ponderosa. And instead of you going to the adventure is coming to you. Now that it kind of worked, it kind of didn't work. And what Deep Space Nine was doing, it felt like every season they had to sort of reinvent their premise, because how many interesting adventures. And also Deep Space Nine, there was a little Casablanca in there, and it's Rick's Cafe American and all of that. So it made sense to me that from a Star Trek perspective, they did a show like Deep Space Nine. I mean, I really do think that's the case. I don't think they ripped off Straczynski, and doing. And basically Babylon 5 too is in kind of in the same way, but I really liked what Babylon 5 is a great science fiction show, because a lot of what they did with the Psi Corps and even the shadows and the idea of the shadows and the Vorlons and I really liked Babylon 5 a lot. Unfortunately, I really wish somebody would go back in and remaster the effects, like do them all from scratch in HD, because one of the greatest problems with Deep Space Nine is the visual effects. I mean, they were early CG, and on TV, the only way we could get those effects that were that effective is because they were able to do them so cheap. Gilbert, did you like Babylon 5? I guess he didn't. But I'm going to show him Babylon 5. He'll watch it. Alexander Wilson asks, what's your opinion on Full Metal Jacket? I thought it was horrifying, and many Marines have said that the training isn't that far off from real life. Well, first of all, my favorite film director of all time is Stanley Kubrick, and Full Metal Jacket was his second to last film. I loved Full Metal Jacket. You know, I love that movie. I think it's tremendous. And a lot of people, when Full Metal Jacket came out, it was on the tail end of basically a decade of Vietnam movies. You know, famously, we got Apocalypse Now and The Deer Hunter and movies like Coming Home. And it seemed like all of the exploitation films of the late 70s, early 80s, like James Glickenhaus's The Exterminator, Vietnam vets, John Rambo, Vietnam vet. I mean, Vietnam movies permeated the culture for more than 10 years after America's involvement in that war, and that police action in Southeast Asia ended. But I loved Full Metal Jacket because although Full Metal Jacket was set in the Vietnam War, that latter half we actually go, the whole battle of the city of Hue is obviously in Vietnam. I think Full Metal Jacket transcended the same way that Apocalypse Now transcended the Vietnam War and became something more, a treatise about the dehumanization of our military and what it does to people, and seeing what happens in a conflict. I mean, I love Full Metal Jacket. I think it's a wonderful movie. It's a wonderful Stanley Kubrick movie, and I'm glad we got it. I really do think it's a great movie. Emmett Beach, thank you for that, sir. Very much appreciate that support. Isn't it surprising, Emmett Beach asks, isn't it surprising how long it took to get to the golden age of comic book movies? The comics are already a storyboard, and fan reaction tells us which stories work, just waiting for special effects to catch up. You know, Emmett, that's a really interesting point, and I've thought about this a lot. Here's what I believe the problem with comic books, especially in the United States, is. If you go to, say, Japan, the manga and anime and all of that is for everyone. Like, you have salarymen going to work in Japan on trains, reading manga, reading comics about golf. You know, the comics medium was never like in America. I mean, if I could say the word ghettoized, if that, I don't mean it by any. There's no other meaning other than, you know, slums. I mean, people thought they were slumming when they were kids. Comic books are for kids. But if you go to Europe and you go to Asia and you go to all these other countries around the world, there wasn't that stigma because comic books, the comic book medium, wasn't just a superhero medium or for storytelling for kids. It wasn't like Archie or Richie Rich or whatever. So in America, the comic book medium was looked down upon. It was frowned upon. And it was frowned upon for a long time. And look, after I saw Superman the movie when I was a kid, I'm like, oh boy, you know, we're going to get a bunch of, I mean, Superman is this grandiose, mythic epic. I mean, the first, you know, I was watching it again recently, and guys, I always talk about La La Land Records, but La La Land Records just put out, I actually ordered mine finally, the La La Land 3-disc Superman soundtrack, the original. They were able to go back to the original master tapes for the very first time. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. You got to get the La La Land. Even just, it's some of the greatest John Williams music, and there's John Williams music, very alternate takes that we've never heard before. How crazy is it to hear John Williams music? And there's a lot of music you'll recognize from Empire and Raiders that he was playing with at the time. But the epic nature of that Superman film, I thought for sure we would get more superhero movies after that. I mean, the whole vision of Americana, like the Norman Rockwell painting of those Smallville scenes and all of that. But again, if you look at Superman now, it was very difficult. Like, I don't know if I was a kid today, if I was like 8 years old and I had the MCU and I had Man of Steel and I had Aquaman and I tried to go back and watch Superman the movie, it would be a little rough. I'd be like, these special effects probably, you know, why his super speed, it looks goofy. So I think we were waiting, but it wasn't just the special effects technology. We were waiting till our pop culture We needed kids that took comic books seriously to grow up to become the audience for this, and to have kids themselves who they could sort of indoctrinate into the idea. I mean, if you look at the last 30 years of popular culture, kids grew up with the Batman the animated series. If you grew up with that in the early 90s, the X-Men animated series, also in the early 90s, and coming to love these characters and take these stories seriously. You needed that audience to be in place. I always talk about this being the post-Geek Singularity community. And some people, they still ask me, what do you mean by post-Geek Singularity community? As I've said a million times, the post-Geek Singularity community is what happened when all geek interests exploded and went mainstream. And that was because boys and girls have started video games, watching these animated things, watching shows like the 90s shows like Buffy, and all of the pop culture that kids took in, that was not just for little boys anymore. It was for little girls too. And little girls had their own anime and Sailor Moon and things like that. And when it reached sort of a saturation point, everybody became a geek. And when everybody's a geek, we live in the post-geek singularity, where no longer is our geek interests a niche thing. The reason Infinity War made $2 billion plus at the box office, and why I think that Captain Marvel does have a shot at $1 billion at the box office, is because we are, all of us around the planet Earth, we're living in a science fiction world. We're living in a geek world. We're carrying supercomputers around in our pockets. Video phones. Not only are video phones real, we can carry them around, and I can talk to you on this live chat from my phone anywhere in the world I want. It's unbelievable. So I think the golden age of comic book movies came about as a result of the audience itself wanting to see. Because remember, 15 years ago, we were still getting movies like Catwoman, directed by Pitoff. You look at Catwoman, you're like, that movie was made by people that weren't taking the comic book medium seriously. Another thing, you look at comic books, and the people that were making comic book movies were not taking the medium seriously. They were prejudiced against comic books as a medium, and we lived, the OG geeks like myself, we were living through the comic explosion of the 80s, when you had everything from Frank Miller starting out with Daredevil, and then going to Ronin, and then going to the Dark Knight Rises, or the Dark Knight Returns, and then you had Watchmen from Alan Moore after he came on the scene with Swamp Thing, and suddenly we're seeing Howard Chaykin's American Flag and First Comics, and it was a renaissance in storytelling, where comic book storytelling, undoubtedly and undeniably grew up. And so there was a perception in the world. I mean, for me, Neil Gaiman's The Sandman, came out in 1987, and The Sandman still is my favorite comic book series of all time. And it's a comic book series that's about storytelling. So yeah, man, I think the world needed, not just effects technology, but the audience and the world needed to catch up. I really believe that. Emmett Beach is also saying, too bad people want to like or dislike Captain Marvel based on politics. Oh, I already read this, but isn't all art appreciative? They're often very subjective. Yes. But what's really interesting to me is the discussion of why people were poised to dislike Captain Marvel wasn't even about the movie itself. It's about something that Brie Larson wanted to see happen, which was to have more people. Like, for instance, I know that Jordan Peele's Us just debuted at South by Southwest. It just premiered, and people are saying how great it is. And I don't know if this is true, but I was reading, I think this morning, if they had a lot of Black journalists were the first people who were allowed to see it. And I'm like, that's great. I mean, why not? Because they're going to have, the fact that you make a movie about a Black family confronting, and there's racial issues, I see nothing wrong with allowing a certain group of critics to see it first. I don't feel that that's at all racist. I mean, the Black experience is baked into Jordan Peele's films, and they are. I mean, I'm not going to come out and go, Get Out was totally racist against white people. I'm like, look at white people's history toward Black people in the United States. To this day, there's young men getting gunned down in their backyards of their grandmother's house. I mean, it's happening now. So it doesn't bother me that people are asking for this kind of inclusion. It doesn't threaten me. It doesn't threaten me. All it does is it means that people are thinking about giving other people opportunities. and I haven't been luckily I've sort of controlled my own destiny. But look, all of us deserve a chance, and I don't have a problem with I mean, Captain Marvel, Wonder Woman. Isn't it great that young little girls now can have a movie they can watch and look up to because they see themselves in it? The same is true of Black Panther. You've got, if you're an 8-year-old black boy or an 8-year-old black girl, you now have a superhero movie where you can see yourselves in. Isn't that great? I mean, I think that's a phenomenal thing, because before Black Panther came out, there was no $150 million plus superhero movie with a predominantly black cast, and now there is one, and that's cool. I mean, it's cool that we have, and it was made by, lest we not forget, you had the first women, 2 black women won Academy Awards. They were the first black women that did not win acting awards in over 30 years. The costume designer and the production designer. For the very first time at the Academy Awards, for the first time in 30 years, you had that kind of representation. And that's fantastic. I mean, this is great because they bring their own interesting, the more perspectives you get to work on films, let me tell you, the better off you are. Because you want people, when you work on movies and entertainment, you want them to bring their unique perspective, because what it does is it adds a little flavor to the mix. It adds a little, again, I've said on the show before, Stanley Kubrick used to send his assistant around and would ask department heads, do you have any ideas today? Mr. Kubrick would like to hear your ideas for the day. And it doesn't matter what it is, because Stanley Kubrick was not afraid of other people's ideas, because he knows that he was the filter through which the movie was going to get made. So he could take anyone's ideas, and if he liked them, he would use them, because that was his job. So Oscar Castillo says, thank you for the super chat, sir. Hey, Rob, Discovery got it right. If you look at a map of the Alpha Quadrant, there are 2 star bases in the adjoining sector to the Talos star group. It's not isolated as people imagine. It's just quarantined. Well, that could be true. I'm just saying that within, because they've never established that canonically. And that's fine, but I would think that my point is that the Talosians would fuck with people. But that might be true. Like, I think, okay, that, it's just quarantine, but if it's 2 light years away from a starbase, it's right in the middle of shipping lanes. So, but yeah, I that doesn't bother me. David Cabrera is here. He says, sitting in theaters, about to watch Captain Marvel again. Can't wait to hear a review tomorrow with John Campea. Just wanted to support and say hi to all and have a nice day. Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. That's good. I can't wait to hear more about what people think. I loved yesterday hearing about what everyone thought of Captain Marvel. I thought that was really, really cool. Learning Disabled Spock says, I'm not going to say knowing who Tuxedo Mask was. Learning Disabled Spock says, I'm not going to say knowing who Tuxedo Mask was got me laid, but it might have. Yes, see, let me tell you, your knowledge of geek culture would not get you laid back in the 80s. At least not very much. But I think that your chances of getting lucky at places like San Diego Comic-Con have grown exponentially based on your knowledge of geek culture. Maybe that's true, but I'm not just maybe I have knowledge of that, or maybe I don't, but I think it's probably true. Learning Disabled Spock also says, I like the theory that Snowpiercer is the sequel to Willy Wonka. If you guys haven't seen Snowpiercer, the movie Snowpiercer, you should. It's really interesting. They're turning it into a TV series. And even though it's had a lot of problems in production, but you guys should see it. Vesna is here from Bosnia. Hey, guys. All of you who already saw Captain Marvel, I want to ask a question. How many trailers were before the movie? In my theater, only one for Endgame, so I was wondering if it was an exception. It's really up to the theater what trailers they play. In my theater, they didn't play the Endgame trailer. They played the Dark Phoenix trailer, and they played the Shazam trailer. They played one more trailer. I forget what it is, but no Endgame trailer. Caledon Sound says, I'll never understand what order Rob reads super chats in. Mine is about to disappear off the screen. Wait, didn't I read it? Didn't I read your no, I read your super chat, didn't I? Caledon Sound asks, see, thanks for reminding me. Talos 4 or Talos Skrull, vote now. You know what? I don't know, man. I thought Talos Skrull was really good, but I'm a big fan of the Cage. Anthony Gonzalez, do you have any DS9 novel recommendations? You have to read Andrew Robinson's Garrick novel. I think it's called A Stitch in Time. You got to read that. It's really, really, really good. Dan V900 says the Skrulls were the best part of the movie. Secret Invasion was a mediocre event and was reviewed as such at the time. I thought so too. No one thinks that is very good who actually read it. I don't think Secret Invasion was very good either, to be honest. Writer BL Alley says the events of Captain Marvel do not preclude Secret Invasion. All races have layers and divisions. Look at the Kree in the first Guardians of the Galaxy. I like seeing Ronan the Accuser. I liked how they worked all that in. It's nice to know he's always been a dick. He was going to bomb the Earth. So, yeah. I don't know, man. But yeah, Stitch in Time is really, really good. And, there's another hardcover book, a DS9 book called Warped. I want to say that K.W. Jeter wrote it. My girlfriend Elizabeth has a hair salon here in the house, and Gilbert is taking her hair salon materials that she colors people's hair with out into the yard. That is not good. Vesta asks, how did I like Jude Law in the movie? I liked Jude Law in the movie. I thought he was great. Jude Law I love Jude Law. I love Jude Law in everything. I love Jude Law in Gattaca, one of my favorite science fiction films of the last 20 years. I loved Jude Law in The Talented Mr. Ripley. I want to go party with that guy. Yeah, I love Jude Law. He was great. Dale M says, the last time I saw a movie that was as packed was when I saw The Force Awakens, and it's been like that all weekend here. 3 screens, many showings all day, and they're all packed every showing. Yeah. Look, man, people are loving Captain Marvel. They are loving Captain Marvel, and I think, as I predicted, I think the female audience, I think mothers and daughters are going to this movie probably more than once. I think it was something nobody anticipated, especially outside the sphere of geek punditry, and it's great. It's great for the movie, and it's great for everyone, really. I think so. CMO and Logistics said, you have convinced me to rewatch Deep Space Nine for the 15th time, all episodes. Gosh, I got to get out more often. I have to tell you, dude, I assume you're a dude. If you're not a dude, I'm sorry, dudette. I got sucked in. I started watching Deep Space Nine, man. You get sucked right in. You got to do it again and watch it again. It's great. Prepper James says the middle of Captain Marvel was boring. See, I didn't think so. I mean, I think that it felt like a 90s action movie to me. I liked the unwinding of the plot and getting to know her and getting to know her background and seeing what happened to her. That was all character building. I liked all that. I thought it was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. And Prepper James says it was average, but average compared to what? Like, the funny thing that I don't understand is, to me, if a movie's good, a movie's good. I was entertained. I have a pretty good movie radar, and I thought Captain Marvel was really good. Did I think it was great? No, I thought it was really good. I mean, I reserve great for different kinds of movies, but I thought it was a really solid entry into the MCU, and I really enjoyed seeing things like the Kree homeworld. I like seeing Carol Danvers. I thought Brie Larson was great in the role. I liked her relationship with Nick Fury. Gilbert, please stop running and taking things out of Elizabeth's going to kill him. There's talk around here, by the way, of getting Gilbert a sister, which I don't know if I'm so keen on. The balance of power with Skippy might turn into an arms race of some kind, and I'm not looking forward to that. But it's not up to me, so there's nothing I can do. Writer BL Alley says I was engrossed in Captain Marvel from start to finish, so much so it ended too quick for me. I agree. I would have watched that movie for another half an hour. I mean, I thought that the ending, I really liked all the twists that happened at the end, the back and forth that went on, and I could have watched it a lot longer. And I would like to, have seen more of the Kree homeworld. I'm glad we got to see. Well, never mind. I don't want to spoil it for people that haven't seen it. I heard Animal Mother is Private Pile if you survive basic training, says pre-live teaser. I don't know about that, but that's not a bad idea. Victory Unlimited show. Kubrick is my favorite. Victory Unlimited show says Kubrick is your favorite director. My favorite director is the late great Alfred Hitchcock. What are your favorite Hitchcock movies and why? My favorite Alfred Hitchcock movie is Rear Window. By far. I mean, I like lots of Hitchcock movies, but the reason I love Rear Window so much is, first of all, I love Jimmy Stewart. Second of all, I love the fact that the movie's all set basically in his room and then on one stage. and it's contained. I love contained stories. And Grace Kelly in Rear Window to me is the single most attractive female. Like, her character in that movie is my favorite my dream female movie character. She loves Jimmy Stewart, but she comes a woman who looks like her, has there ever been a more beautiful woman, if blondes are your thing or whatever, than Grace Kelly in Rear Window? I think not. I mean, I also love Catherine Trammell in Basic Instinct, but that's a whole different story. But she comes with this military bag packed with military precision to stay overnight, and I just love everything about her character. I love Rear Window so much, so very much. But you know what? I really love Notorious. I really love North by Northwest. Of course, I love Vertigo. I love the 39 Steps. So those are some of my. And of course, everyone loves Psycho and The Birds, but I really, really love Rear Window. I love Rear Window a lot, a great deal. Patrick Glanville says, Captain Marvel reminds me of Revenge of the Sith in the way it has a political message. Sith riffed on Bush Jr. and Marvel on Trump. Good movie. Yeah, it kind of did. It kind of did. It was interesting, the politics of what's going on, and I really enjoyed that subtext. Like, I wanted to get more into the Kree politics of it all. I mean, I thought that was really interesting. I loved opening with the Star Force and seeing what they were doing and how it all worked and the political machinations. And I love the idea that when you go see the Supreme Intelligence and how all that worked, I thought that was really great. It was really cool. Celadon Sands says, what did you think of Disturbia? I'm not sure what you mean. Is Disturbia the movie with what's his face, who was locked in his house? Oh, yeah. You're asking me because of Rear Window. Disturbia, the Shia LaBeouf movie. If that's what you're talking about, it was okay. I didn't think. I mean, I'd much rather see. It was okay. I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was as charming as Rear Window, and it wasn't as. The thing about Rear Window is it's really a relationship movie between Grace Kelly and Jimmy Stewart, and there just happens to be this thing happening within the confines of their relationship where Raymond Burr may or may not have murdered his wife. You don't really know what's happening, and that's kind of the plot. But it really is about, like, Jimmy. It's one of those movies where, if any of you guys have ever seen, there are a couple movies teen comedies that would always drive me crazy because. You like, somebody has a best friend who's clearly the best looking girl in the movie. There's a movie called Secret Admirer. It's an 80s teen comedy. And Lori from Full House, I forget her last name. She was like married to Massimo, or she's still married to the fashion designer Massimo. She's like one of the most beautiful women. She's so sweet and so nice. And C. Thomas Howell's her best friend. And then he wants to go out with Kelly, what's her face, who's John Travolta's wife in real life. And she's like the hot blonde, but clearly Lori Loughlin. Lori Loughlin is clearly the most desirable woman in this movie. And she's so sweet and so nice, but C. Thomas Howell is not interested in her. And I was watching the movie the whole time thinking, dude, your best friend is already the most attractive woman in this movie. Why are you so stupid and blind? The same was true of Some Kind of Wonderful, when Eric Stoltz wants Leah Thompson. Now, Leah Thompson, admittedly, is very attractive, but Mary Stuart Masterson is Watts. I mean, come on, who clearly loves him? Watts is like the coolest chick in the whole movie, and you're waiting for Eric Stoltz the whole time. It's like, dude, come on, man. Your best friend is the woman for you, and you don't see that. Why don't you see that? And the same is true of like a Rear Window. You're like, Jimmy, come here, buddy. Let me just whisper in your ear. Grace Kelly is the most attractive woman on the planet Earth, and she loves you, and you're resisting her affections. Why are you doing this? But I mean, Hitchcock was smart. That was part of why the movie is so great and so charming, and that's why I love Rear Window. And then I really do love Vertigo as well. Vertigo is an incredible movie. But I like the character banter. I mean, Vertigo is really about one man's crazy obsession, whereas Rear Window is really about this delightful relationship between these two people. It's like When Harry Met Sally, but with suspense. Anthony Gonzalez says, for International Women's Day, fans made a collage of badass women in TV and film, and in my humble opinion, they forgot about Faye Grant from V. You know what, Anthony? God bless you, sir. And that's why you are here, a member of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. Faye Grant from V was badass. I mean, she was a rebel leader. She was amazing. You know what's really funny? Okay, I don't know why. You just reminded me that Faye Grant, there's a great movie, if you haven't seen it, from 1990 that stars Richard Gere, Andy Garcia, and Faye Grant is in it, and so is one of the Billy Baldwin's in it. It's called Internal Affairs. It's a cop thriller. If you haven't seen Internal Affairs, it rules. if you like cops gone bad movies, Internal Affairs, everything about Internal Affairs is great. But Faye Grant is in Internal Affairs too. And whenever I think about Faye Grant, you talk about V. But you're right. That's only because people have overlooked the great V miniseries. Whoever made that video clearly does not know their early 80s sci-fi miniseries, nor did they see the short-lived television show. But that is a glaring omission. A glaring omission. They need to put that back in there. I'm with you, Anthony. I am with you. Donnie Pearson says, hello, everyone. Hello, Rob. I wish Shout Factory and the Disney-bound 20th Century Fox Television would bring one of the final MTM Enterprise productions, The Cape, to DVD and Blu-ray. I never saw that. Maybe they will. I suspect that anything like that, eventually it's all going to go up on Disney Plus. They're going to mine it all. Because they can. I think that's great. Pre-live teaser says Maverick artists helped reinvigorate Daredevil, New Mutants, etc. when the genre was running low on new ideas. Absolutely true. I mean, remember when Bill Sienkiewicz he jumped over from Moon Knight to New Mutants? Remember how mind-blowing that was? I think he came on like after, I want to say, was it issue 19? I mean, how great was it? 18 or 19 with the Demon Bear storyline and all that. When Bill Sienkiewicz jumped on to New Mutants, it was like literally eye-popping. And of course, Miller's run on Daredevil. And then when absolutely true. You're absolutely right about that. And that was so exciting about the 80s is that comic artists, it just exploded. It just exploded. It was great. Bunyan Snipe says, oh, Mr. Kubrick, I was wondering why you would want to fake the moon landings. Yeah, that's actually a funny movie. There's a movie about that. It's pretty good. Robert April said, if John Ford ever asked you for your ideas, you were about to be set up. Is that true? John M. Ford wrote he wrote two great Star Trek novels, one of which was The Final Reflection. If you guys love Klingons and you love Star Trek, read John Ford's novel, The Final Reflection. It's so good. Clearly, I don't think anyone who worked on Star Trek Discovery read that novel, but they should because it's great. And then he wrote another book called How Much for Just the Planet, another Star Trek book. Man, you gotta read that book. It's so good. Let's see. Somebody sent me a super chat, but then retracted their message. Dun, dun, dun. That's mysterious. Brian Eng says, oh, wait, you're responding to something else. Whenever I read I jump around on these chats. I jump all over the place, just so you know. Keladon, you asked how I read. I don't read them in order. I just zip around seeing what people say, looking for fun things to say. Olenti says, Shazam, Far From Home, Dark Phoenix, Rocketman, Hobbs and Shaw, Frozen 2, Dumbo, a movie with Charlize Theron and Seth Rogen. At one point, I checked the time to see how far past showtime it was. Those are all the trailers you got in the theater? Wow, that's awesome. I would have loved that. Oh, we got Rocketman too. We got Rocketman as well. That's the Elton John fictitious or fictional biopic. That's rad. And you know what? That Charlize Theron and Seth Rogen movie looks pretty funny. I love that you got all those trailers. Let's see. Hey, Robert. Carl McGill says, hey, Robert, just in Mexico on vacation, taking some time to check you out. Cheers. Well, Carl, thank you for checking me out. Be careful on vacation. You never know what's going to happen to you in Mexico. And that is me plugging one of my favorite writers, Don Winslow's new book, The Border. It just came out. It's the Return to the King of Mexican Drug Cartel books. You got to read it. FX just announced they're doing a TV series. Very excited about that. Bunyan Snipe says, I want a Grand Theft Auto game style video game set on the Kree homeworld. That's actually a really good idea. I would love to see that with flying cars and stuff. Crowd Panda says Vertigo is his Or, oh, is that her? Is that a you? I can't tell. Crowd Panda says Vertigo is my favorite. That's a good choice. Josh Crichton says, what about a teams match? You and Campia versus Fernandez and Harloff. Bring it on. That would be fun. I like that. Let's see. Vesson says, didn't show the Endgame trailer? No. It seems that only in Europe they've showed it. Maybe because they know we can hardly wait for it. We can hardly wait for it too, Vesna. We here in Europe. I'm telling you, I want to see it. I want to be a part of that. Absolutely. Victory Unlimited Show says, one of the badass chick movies was The Long Kiss Goodnight. What did you think of it? It was Sam Jackson. I mean, okay, that was written. Who wrote The Long Kiss Goodnight? Shane Black wrote The Long Kiss Goodnight, director of Iron Man 3 and the recent Predator film and Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. But he also wrote, of course, The Last Boy Scout, and he wrote Lethal Weapon, and he was in Predator. I love The Long Kiss Goodnight. It was directed by Rennie Harlan. You know, its direction's a little, it's so 90s in its conception and execution, but The Long Kiss Goodnight rules. And Gina Davis rules in it too. I mean, it was post Thelma and Louise. That shit was dope. I love that movie. It's so much fun. Spartan Jeremy says, Crixus Maximus, Trek inspired in so much that my project is designed to depict a more harmonious, brighter future, but I have problems with the Trek ship design. I don't know if you're talking about a fan film or what that is, but I'm curious. Brian Eng says, Godzilla and Rocket Man double feature. I'd do that. That's rad. I'd go on that. Clayton George says, as far as badass women go, I think that Lady Penelope from the Thunderbirds is a wonderful British badass. The Hood never stood a chance. Again, you know, there's such a rich history of strong female characters in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And who he is referring to is Clayton is referring to Penelope Crichton Ward, Lady Penelope. She is, of course, the female secret agent that aids the Tracy family in the Thunderbirds, and she first appeared as she's a super marionette. She was introduced in the 60s Thunderbird TV series, and she has a pink Rolls Royce. It would be Angeline would be very, very jealous of Lady Penelope, and she has her manservant Parker. And Parker and Lady Penelope have the two greatest accents ever depicted, two greatest British accents ever depicted in television. Which is awesome. Claude Balls says the purple-haired women of the early 80s series UFO. Claude, UFO debuted in 1969. It's 1969 to 71. 26 episodes. Is one of my favorite shows of all time. I did a Robservations chat about it. I think the sound was fucked up though, so I apologize for that. But yes, they were badass too. Lieutenant Gay Ellis, her first name is Gay. Gay Ellis. She ran Moonbase. And they traded off. The Moonbase personnel would sometimes be on skydivers. You know, they're submarines. Great stuff. Great stuff. Yeah, so that's good stuff. Nihilist Shadow says, learning disabled Spock so we can punch out Alex Kurtzman and take Star Trek to the enchantment under the sea dance. That's a very clever use of different metaphors from different things. I like that you said that. That is great. Captain Robert April, director John Ford, he burned John Wayne on the set of Stagecoach and Jimmy Stewart during The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, much to the amusement of John Wayne. John Ford didn't mess around. Is that who you're talking about? You're talking about director John Ford. Because your name's Captain Robert April, I immediately went to John Ford, the writer of Star Trek novels. You're talking about John Ford, the director. See, that's where my mind's at. So I apologize, Captain April. Yes, John Ford, the director of many, many great westerns. See, we're talking Star Trek. I sometimes I even mix up my metaphors. I never know you never know where these Robservations chats are going to go. But yes, I agree with all of this, with everything you're saying. Well, guys, I think I'm going to end this chat. It has been fun. I'm sorry it was sort of rambling, and I didn't really have a great point of view when it came to Star Trek Discovery this week. I wanted to tear into it, but I realized, Mark Lurseth says UFO is how they said it. Yes, famously on the series UFO, the Jerry Anderson series UFO, they did say UFO. And it's funny, I wrote an article for Sci-Fi Universe magazine back in the 90s, and I called it Unidentified Flying UFOs. So I'm going to take off. Richard Ford says manservant. Now that's a worthy legacy term. Yeah. Butler. Can you not say that? I can't even say that for fun. Crixus Maximus says the first thing you do is hire Neil McDonough to play Ed Straker in any UFO reboot. Now, I think that's a great idea. I work with Bill Hunt writing a proposal for a new UFO TV series. I was very happy with it. I thought it was actually very, very good. And in our TV series, it takes place now. It takes place a little bit in the near future. The original UFO series, it's set in 1980, was canonical. We had a whole thing about it, and people said, "Oh, you're relying too much on the old show." And we're like, we're not relying too much on the old show. We're using the old show to inform the new show the same way that Game of Thrones has this whole history that you haven't seen that they keep referring to, the Mad King Targaryen and all that. I thought it would have been great. Nina Barry of Shadow was hot, says Oscar Castillo. Yes. And Nina Barry, by the way, she was one of the Moonbase personnel that later showed up on a skydiver. So she was badass. I agree. So I'm gonna end this chat now. I'll be back tomorrow to chat. I'm going to finish working on I'm making actually a small short teaser trailer for our short film Skyfighter today. And I'm going to try and finally move my office around so I can have a glass shelves full of my Hot Toy figures behind me, and I don't have to be pointed on a 45-degree angle anymore, even though I kind of like the depth it provides. So all of you, thank you for being here. This has been a fun chat this Saturday afternoon. And as always, you members of the Post-Geek Singularity know what I'm going to say, which is every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And I believe that sincerely. And all of you who haven't, go see Captain Marvel, go see anything, go see Apollo 11, please go see the documentary Apollo 11. It's amazing. And we need more documentaries like that. It's at theaters nationwide. Go check it out. I don't know if it's playing in Europe, Vesna, but you should see it because it's awesome. So all of you, thank you very much. Comment, subscribe, come to my website, theburnettwork.net. Follow me on Twitter at BurnettRM. Find me on Instagram at RMBurnett, all of those things. And let's keep this discussion going everywhere. So thanks a lot, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow.